Trump's Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent dropping a truth bomb to the media this morning. Why and how? How is it possible we're seeing real wages skyrocket this much in just 5 months? Also, what in the world is happening in Minnesota? The FBI confirming that Kash Patel received a confession letter from Vance Bolter confessing that Governor Tim Walz hired him to do it. What in the effing world is happening? Yes, we're going to show you that. And this bizarre FBI press conference that just happened, what else are they hiding about this? And more stories as well from around the country, including an update on Israel-Iran. We have some breaking news on this. But before we get started, thank you for liking and sharing these videos. It really helps me out. And consider subscribing if you appreciate these regular updates.
We haven't had a recession. As a matter of fact, the economy is very strong. Household income growth was 0.7 or 0.8% in April. For 1 month, that's out of the park.
So for months now, really since Trump came back into office, we've been hearing that we're going to have a recession. Left-wing media, they've even gone full conspiracy, claiming that the Trump team was purposely trying to create a recession to force the Fed to cut rates. All of this proven out to be wrong. There's been no recession. Their claims that tariffs would cause skyrocketing inflation has been wrong. Their claim that tariffs would cause empty shelves and price gouging, that was wrong. In fact, all of this analysis, not only wrong, but we learned this past week that Trump's accomplished something that no other president has ever done. His policies have now pushed real wages for working class Americans, real wages meaning after inflation, for hourly workers has increased 2% in just 5 months, something no other president has even gotten close to doing. Let's watch this. And then after, we're going to look at where this gets really interesting. Watch.
We haven't had a recession. As a matter of fact, the economy is very strong. Household income growth was 0.7 or 0.8% in April. For 1 month, that's out of the park.
And you've got some other good news, haven't you, about blue-collar wage growth?
Blue-collar wage growth. The only other time it's been this high, wait for it, was during President Trump's first term. So we've seen real wages for hourly workers, non-supervisory workers, rise almost 2% in the first 5 months.
Why is that?
No president has done that before.
And why is that?
Now, where this gets super interesting is how Bessent says Trump's doing this, how he's achieving this. Because under Biden, for 4 years, blue-collar wages, blue-collar wage growth plummeted. Real wages under Biden fell 2.1%. Fell 2.1%. Again, real wages mean after inflation. So you look at the raises or wage cuts workers get, then adjust them for inflation, and what's left over, those are either the real wage gain or the real wage cut. Under Biden, we saw skyrocketing inflation. At one point during his term, headline CPI hit 9%, 9.1% or something like that. But even after adjusting for those price gains, hourly workers still saw a wage cut of 2.1%. So why, how has Trump managed to not only reverse that, but double it in just 5 months? Scott Bessent revealing the hidden mechanism driving all of this, driving blue-collar wage growth over Trump's first 5 months, saying it's got nothing to do with minimum wage laws that you hear Dems talk about constantly or government mandates, saying it all comes down to strategic displacement of cheap labor. That's right, the Biden administration flooding this country with 11 plus million illegals willing to work for low wages, undercutting American workers. Watch what he said.
I think there's also likely a component of whether it's 12 or 20 million illegal aliens coming out of the workforce. And Joe Biden opened the border and it was flooded. And that for working Americans, that's a disaster because it's pressure on their wages.
And so blue-collar wage growth went down during Biden.
It did.
And it's back up again just in a few months.
In 5 months.
5 months,
5
wow.
months.
Which is so obvious. You don't have to be an economist to understand this. All you hear on corporate media is how these illegals do jobs that Americans refuse to, which is not true. Illegals primarily take construction jobs, blue-collar type jobs, whether it be laying cement, pouring concrete, working on demo crews, warehouse work, steel mills, manufacturing even. If you remove that layer of cheap labor, these businesses are forced to hire Americans, forced to pay a little bit more, but Americans end up getting those jobs. Scott Bessent adding that for decades, Wall Street has had a great run, while Main Street struggles. Trump's mission, he says, to give Main Street its turn to also participate. Watch this.
And I assume that I will walk out of the building in January of 2029. What are the 3 to 5 things that I would have liked to have done? So stabilize the U.S. finances and put that on a good trajectory that will make sure that we have another great 250 years, bring back and make sure that Main Street and Wall Street have both done well. Because Wall Street's had a great run, and now it's Main Street's turn to also participate. And Wall Street Journal accused me of populist remarks. What's wrong with both doing well? Yeah. And then the third is, I think, to lock in the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency for many more generations. And I got lots of ideas that we're working on how to do that.
Unfortunately, these new wage growth numbers were completely overshadowed this week because the Israel-Iran war. All of this good economic news, the huge economic recovery we're witnessing, all at risk now due to this war. Should Trump give the go order and begin bombing Iran, oil prices will spike. Should Iran choose to close the Strait of Hormuz or even try to close it, oil prices will spike, all hurting Trump's larger economic agenda. Low energy prices is a key piece to Trump's policy goals, yet we're still hearing these strikes more than likely will happen. A limited strike on the Fordow enrichment site is what we're hearing. Last night, 6 more B-2 stealth bombers departing, flying to Andersen Air Force Base in Guam. Air traffic control showing aerial refueling taking place during the trip, which means they may be carrying very heavy payloads. These B-2s en route to Guam right now very well could be loaded with these Moab bunker buster bombs, just waiting on President Trump to give the order. Satellite imagery from June 19th of Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia showing a massive number of U.S. military aircraft as well as Allied forces arriving within the last week. Allied Air Forces amassing a major presence at this base. Open source intel showing 54 F-16s, 22 KC-135s, and 11 C-130s, all located now at Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia. Iran's foreign minister confirming yesterday, we are not seeking negotiations. We have nothing to discuss with the United States, making what I'd say is a fatal mistake. The U.S. State Department confirming Iran's foreign minister telling Steve Witkoff yesterday, that's Trump's special envoy, that zero enrichment is undoubtedly rejected. Watch.
Well, tonight, the clock is ticking with President Trump giving Iran that 2-week timeline, could be sooner, as he said. But Iran, for their part, appears belligerent. They are recalcitrant, with Iran's foreign minister rejecting talks with the United States.
We are not seeking negotiations. It is the Americans who want talks. They've sent messages several times, very serious ones. But we made it explicitly clear to them that as long as this aggression and invasion continues, there's absolutely no room for talk or diplomacy. We are engaged in legitimate self-defense, and this defense will not stop under any circumstances. We have nothing to discuss with the United States, which is a partner in these crimes.
So they don't want negotiations, despite their entire leadership being totally decimated. And then there's this headline: Iran says no to nuclear talks during the conflict. Well, a senior Iranian official also told Reuters that zero enrichment is, quote, undoubtedly rejected, especially now under Israel's strike. So they want to continue enriching.
Breaking news coming in right now. We just got confirmation that those B-2 bombers we mentioned a minute ago were in fact refueled shortly after takeoff, meaning they are carrying some type of heavy payload, likely live ordnances, likely those 30,000-pound bunker buster bombs. One B-2 can haul 2 of those bombs. So if there's 6 of them, we're talking 12 of those huge 30,000 bunker buster bombs. Meanwhile, the left is now arguing on behalf of the current Iranian regime, saying they're the most Western government in the Middle East. Watch what they're saying.
Why is it a foundational issue for Trump that Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapon? Why is this something that the U.S. should be involved in? Why are we allied with Israel?
He says because they chant death to America.
They chant death to America. I went to Iran in 2014. I was sitting at a rally. These young guys were chanting death to America. I had a minder. I said, what are they saying? They're saying death to America. They finished the chant, and 2 young men came over and said, are you American? I said, yes. Says, we want to welcome you to our country. We love American culture and love American movies. They wanted to talk about all these things. Iran is the most Western nation in the whole Middle East. We have much more in common with them than a lot of countries that we do have alliances with.
It is true that Iran used to be one of the more Western-like governments, secular governments in the Middle East. Videos circulating online showing what the country looked like before the Islamic Revolution in 1979. We used to be very close allies with Iran. Trump now in a very precarious position. If he doesn't authorize these strikes, he risks making the U.S. look weak, look indecisive. If he does strike, though, he risks throwing us into a large, protracted war. Iran could retaliate by launching missiles at U.S. air bases or U.S. bases in the region, in Iraq, or by trying to close the Strait of Hormuz or mining the Strait of Hormuz, all of which would force the U.S. to get even more involved. Anything with the Strait of Hormuz would force Trump to bomb Iran's naval infrastructure. So many risks involved here. Trump doesn't like risk. He likes winning. Yet all of the options before him seem to be lose-lose type scenarios. I believe he will end up ordering these strikes. I believe he was hoping that the mullahs would have caved by now, but they haven't, because we're dealing with religious zealots here, not rational actors. They're martyrs. They'd rather martyr themselves than be seen capitulating. And Israel running low now on defensive munitions. Each one of those Arrow 3 interceptors that they use to intercept Iranian missiles, get this, cost between $2 to $6 million a piece, each one. War is extremely expensive and inflationary. In another story, the Minnesota shooter story continuing to get even more disturbing. Vance Bolter, the man who was appointed by Tim Walz and then arrested and charged with assassinating that Minnesota lawmaker last week and shooting multiple others. It turns out he has sent Kash Patel a letter, a written confession, claiming that he wasn't only appointed to that working board by Tim Walz, but that he was also hired by Walz and instructed to take out Senator Amy Klobuchar so he could claim her Senate seat for himself. What in the world is happening here? Watch.
Assassin who disguised himself as a cop to shoot down Democrat politicians and their spouses. He killed 2 and seriously injured 2 others. Today, we're finding out he wrote a letter to the FBI claiming he was trained by the U.S. military, quote, off the books, and that Tim Walz asked him to kill Amy Klobuchar so he could take her Senate seat. Belter's facing state and federal murder charges.
He also claims in this letter that the military, the U.S. military, he says, covertly trained him off book. And it gets even stranger. In this new press conference by the FBI, they explain how police arrived on scene before Bolter entered this lady's house, this lawmaker's house, got into a shootout with them. Doesn't it seem like maybe, just maybe, Bolter was never supposed to make it out of that house? That's what normally happens, right? These shooters are always ended before we can learn what the real story is or the backstory. Well, not this time. Bolter's talking and saying some wild things. So, I don't know, did the plan fail? I have no idea. Watch what the FBI said.
Belter then traveled to Brooklyn Park, Minnesota, in the home of Minnesota State Representative Melissa Hortman. At approximately 3:30 a.m., Belter arrived at Representative Hortman's house in his black SUV with the police license plates. He parked in the driveway and left the emergency lights on his SUV flashing as if he was a police officer. Belter approached Representative Hortman's home, again dressed as a police officer, wearing the tactical vest and body armor, and wearing that hyper-realistic mask. He was armed and carrying a flashlight. Before he entered the home, 2 Brooklyn Park police officers arrived at the scene. They too had been dispatched to check on Representative Hortman after learning of the shooting of Senator Hoffman. When they arrived at the scene, they saw Belter's black SUV parked in the driveway with the emergency lights flashing, and they saw Belter standing in front of the house several feet from the door. When Belter saw the officers get out of the car, he drew his weapon and began firing. He rushed into the house through the front door, firing into it. He repeatedly fired into the house, and when he entered...
What I do know is that this Vance Belter story, to me, makes very little sense. And now he's claiming he was a hired assassin by Tim Walz. Let me know what you think. Is this guy just batshit crazy? Or is there, I don't know, more to the story? Obviously, yes, he's insane. Anybody who does that isn't right in the head, but I don't know. Let me know what you're thinking about this. All right, that wraps up this episode. Like, subscribe. We'll see you next time.